The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, a mixture that gave the place an air of solemnity and quiet authority. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, catching motes of dust that danced lazily in the warm morning light. The sound of shuffling papers and muted whispers filled the air as lawyers adjusted their suits, poised to begin a day of serious proceedings. At the center of it all, the judge, a stern man with deep lines etched into his forehead, perched on his high bench, peering over his wire-rimmed glasses at the scattered files before him. He tapped a wooden gavel lightly against the desk, a signal that silence was expected, yet not yet fully enforced. On the far side of the room, a police officer stood rigidly beside a large, dark-coated canine, a German shepherd named Rex. The dog's ears pricked at every sound, alert to every movement. Its training had made it disciplined and precise, but its eyes betrayed intelligence, almost human in their perception. For years, Rex had been part of countless investigations, tracking scents, sniffing out hidden evidence, and providing law enforcement with insights that often made the difference between success and failure. Today, however, the dog would find itself in a situation no training could have predicted. Near the courtroom entrance, a small hand gripped another, trembling slightly with excitement and nervousness. The tiny figure of a 3-year-old girl appeared almost out of place in the austere environment. She wore a pink dress patterned with tiny flowers, her brown curls bouncing as she glanced around, taking in the serious faces and the unfamiliar setting. Her mother knelt beside her, whispering calming words, but even she couldn't fully contain the child's wide-eyed curiosity. The girl's name was Lily, and while she was young, she possessed a keen sense of observation, noticing things others often overlooked. She could sense tension in the air and detect emotions through expressions and gestures that even adults failed to interpret. Lily's attention, however, was immediately drawn to Rex. While the courtroom was full of people dressed in suits, the big dog exuded a presence that was impossible to ignore. He sat patiently, his posture alert but calm, eyes scanning the room with measured interest. Something about him fascinated Lily, the way he held himself, the intelligent gleam in his eyes, the quiet confidence of a creature trained to act decisively when called upon. She leaned forward slightly, whispering to her mother, "Mommy, he looks like a superhero." Her mother smiled nervously, unsure if such a comment was appropriate in the stern setting, but the judge barely noticed. He was preoccupied with the case at hand. The case itself was ordinary in its beginnings, but had already proven complex. A local family had reported a series of thefts, a missing heirloom, several items of sentimental value, and an inexplicable disappearance of the family's beloved pet. The police had been involved for weeks, but progress had been slow. Evidence was scarce, leads were conflicting, and the tension in the community had begun to rise. For the first time in days, the family had agreed to allow a young relative, Lily, to attend the court proceedings. She had witnessed minor events leading up to the investigation, details adults had dismissed, yet those tiny observations would soon prove unexpectedly significant. As the courtroom settled into a semblance of order, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Reporters and photographers were allowed in, cameras ready, recording the legal proceedings. The judge called the case to order, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Lawyers took their positions, one at the plaintiff's table, the other representing the defense. Officers remained vigilant, eyes darting to ensure that security and decorum were maintained. And in the midst of all this, Lily's gaze remained fixed on Rex, unblinking, focused. There was a silent understanding in the way she looked at him, as if she could see something others could not. The room's atmosphere, initially tense and formal, began to shift subtly. Lily's presence was disarming in a way no one could have predicted. Courtroom staff stole glances at the little girl, her innocence contrasting sharply with the seriousness of the proceedings. The police officers, hardened by years of duty, found themselves unconsciously smiling at her curiosity. Even the judge's stern expression softened slightly, though he tried to maintain a professional demeanor. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that today, something unusual was about to occur, something beyond the ordinary legal arguments, beyond evidence and testimony, beyond the formal rituals of justice. Lily took a few tentative steps toward the front of the courtroom, guided gently by her mother. Each step seemed deliberate, as if she knew exactly where she wanted to go. Rex, ever alert, followed her movements with measured attention, his ears twitching slightly. Other officers and spectators watched quietly, sensing that the unfolding moment was extraordinary, though no one could yet define why. The child paused just a few feet from the dog, tilting her head curiously. Then, in a voice that was soft yet clear enough to be heard in the hushed courtroom, she said, "Hello, doggy." A collective pause swept through the room. The murmur of lawyers and officers ceased. The judge blinked, momentarily stunned, unsure if he should intervene. Rex's ears pricked, tail swishing subtly, acknowledging the tiny speaker. It was a moment suspended in time, unexpected, innocent, and utterly captivating. Courtroom observers leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by the child's boldness and the dog's composed reaction. The formal, rigid environment of the courtroom had transformed, even if just for a fleeting moment, into a space where curiosity, innocence, and connection transcended rules and procedure. Even the attorneys, who prided themselves on their ability to remain composed under pressure, found themselves watching intently. One whispered to another, "Is she talking to the dog?" The reply was a barely audible gasp. Reporters began adjusting their cameras, sensing that something newsworthy and extraordinary was about to happen. Lily's mother, nervous but proud, whispered encouragement, "Go ahead, sweetheart." Lily took a deep breath, and for the first time, a quiet confidence emerged in her voice. She was not merely speaking to Rex. She was communicating, observing, and connecting in a way that defied expectations. As the judge prepared to call the next witness, the child's words hung in the air, drawing everyone's attention. There was a tension, a quiet anticipation, as if the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Outside, the sun continued to rise, casting warm light across the polished wooden floors, illuminating faces filled with curiosity, wonder, and disbelief. Today, something remarkable was unfolding, not within the legal arguments, not within the piles of case files, but in the simple, extraordinary interaction between a 3-year-old girl and a police dog. Lily's small hand reached out, and Rex leaned slightly forward, careful and controlled, sensing that this gesture was innocent. The judge, initially wary, now allowed the moment to proceed. There were no objections, no interruptions, only the soft hum of awe and curiosity. The courtroom had become a theater of human and animal connection, of innocence and intuition. Every observer, from the most skeptical officer to the stern judge, realized they were witnessing something rare, a moment that would remain etched in memory long after the case concluded. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, yet time seemed to slow. The shuffling of papers, the whispering of assistants, the subtle movements of officers, all faded into the background. Lily and Rex were at the center, an unlikely duo, commanding attention without demanding it. Eyes followed every movement, ears caught every sound, and hearts quietly leaned into the unfolding scene. In that moment, the courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It was a stage where innocence, intelligence, and connection intersected in the most unexpected, unforgettable way. And so, the stage was set. A 3-year-old and a police dog, seemingly ordinary in their own rights, were about to create a story that would stun everyone present and eventually captivate the world. The story of the case had begun several weeks earlier, in a quiet suburban neighborhood that usually slept under the gentle hum of routine. For the Matthews family, life had always been orderly and calm, filled with laughter, family dinners, and the occasional chaos only children could bring. But that tranquility was shattered one early morning when Mrs. Matthews discovered something missing from her home, a small, intricately carved silver locket, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Its absence was more than the loss of an object. It was the disappearance of a tangible connection to memories long cherished, memories tied to her late grandmother, who had worn the locket with pride for decades. The theft had been subtle, nearly invisible. Nothing in the home appeared disturbed, except for the locket itself. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry, only the eerie absence of a single precious item. Initially, Mrs. Matthews had assumed she had misplaced it, perhaps left it in a pocket or drawer during her morning routine. But as hours passed, and the locket failed to reappear, the unsettling truth sank in: someone had taken it, intentionally, and likely knew its value. The police were called, and Detective Harris, a veteran of the local force with 2 decades of experience, arrived on the scene. He was a practical man, known for his calm demeanor and meticulous methods. His first steps were systematic. He surveyed the room, photographed the area, and noted every minute detail. He examined windows, doors, and even the smallest crevices where a thief might have attempted to hide a stolen item temporarily. Yet, despite his efforts, there were no fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing that could point directly to a culprit. Weeks passed, and the case began to stagnate. Detectives traced every possible lead. Neighbors were interviewed, pawn shops checked, even online marketplaces scoured for a sign of the missing locket, but nothing surfaced. The frustration of the Matthews family grew with each day. Suspicion spread within the neighborhood. A sense of unease settled over the usually friendly community. Everyone seemed to wonder if someone they knew might have crossed an unthinkable line. It was during this tense period that Lily, the 3-year-old niece of the Matthews family, became indirectly involved. Though young, she had an unusual gift for noticing details that escaped adult perception. On the morning of the theft, she had been quietly playing in the living room, building imaginary forts and arranging her dolls with painstaking care. Her small eyes, sharp and observant, had caught subtle movements. The faint glint of something metallic near the side table. A shadow that didn't belong. The soft creak of a floorboard that was usually silent. She hadn't told anyone after all. She was a child, and such observations seemed trivial to the grown-ups. But those details would later become crucial. As the investigation progressed, the Matthews family contacted the local police K-9 unit, requesting Rex, their well-trained German Shepherd. Rex had a reputation for excellence, known for detecting missing objects, tracking scents, and providing crucial insights in complex investigations. When he arrived at the Matthews home, he immediately began scanning the rooms, his keen nose detecting traces that human senses could not perceive. But despite his precision and intelligence, Rex seemed puzzled. The theft had been executed with care, leaving behind no strong scent to follow, no obvious path to track. Detective Harris had a thought, a long shot, but one that could make a difference. Perhaps someone close to the house saw something. He suggested to the officer handling Rex, "We need fresh eyes, even if they're not adults." It was then that Mrs. Matthews mentioned Lily. "She was in the living room that morning," she said, hesitantly. "She noticed things. Small things, but I didn't think they mattered." At first, the detectives had been skeptical. How could a 3-year-old, barely able to form complete sentences, contribute to a criminal investigation? Yet, as often happens in police work, intuition sometimes demands an unconventional approach. Court proceedings had been scheduled after a minor breakthrough in the case. An anonymous tip reported seeing someone carrying a small, metallic object near a local park. While this lead seemed promising, the investigation still lacked definitive evidence tying the suspect to the theft. Bringing Lily to the courtroom was a calculated risk. The hope was that her unique perspective, paired with Rex's tracking ability, might reveal details otherwise overlooked. In essence, the authorities were experimenting with an unusual method, the collaboration of innocence and trained instinct. On the morning Lily arrived, she had been prepped minimally, more out of courtesy than expectation. Her mother had explained that the room would be full of serious people and a large dog, but no one had told her she would have a pivotal role in uncovering clues. Lily had entered the courtroom quietly, hand in hand with her mother, her eyes immediately scanning every corner of the room. She noticed details adults had long since ignored: the slight tilt of Rex's head as he sniffed the air, the subtle twitch of his tail, the polished brass handles on the doors, the faint reflection of sunlight on the polished floorboards. Every element, to Lily, formed part of a larger puzzle, though she didn't yet know it. As she approached the front of the courtroom, curiosity radiated from her small frame. She watched Rex carefully, observing his posture, his subtle movements, his quiet focus. The detectives, lawyers, and judge remained tense, yet they were drawn into the magnetic presence of the child and the dog. Something extraordinary was already unfolding in the silent connection forming between Lily and Rex, a connection that no one could have predicted. Detective Harris whispered to his partner, "She notices things adults don't. Watch her closely." The partner nodded, both skeptical and hopeful. They were about to witness a rare phenomenon, a child's perception, guided by instinct and attention, bridging the gap between human and animal understanding. Lily's observations had the potential to reveal truths that meticulous investigation alone could not. Lily, meanwhile, felt an intuitive sense of purpose. Though she could not articulate why, she believed that Rex needed her guidance. She knelt slightly, meeting the dog's gaze, and her voice trembled softly as she began to speak. "Hello, doggy," she said. The simplicity of her words belied the depth of what was about to unfold. In that moment, the sterile environment of the courtroom transformed. Lawyers paused mid-step, officers shifted in their seats, and the judge leaned forward, intrigued. The case, which had been stagnant for weeks, was now on the precipice of change, guided by the unlikely collaboration of a child's insight and a trained canine's instinct. Outside, sunlight glinted off the courthouse windows, casting long golden beams onto the floor. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, aware subconsciously of the significance of the moment. A 3-year-old and a police dog, both underestimated in their own ways, were about to reshape the investigation. The stolen heirloom, once lost in the shadows of mystery, might finally be within reach, thanks to the intuition of the youngest witness and the unwavering loyalty of a K9, trained for years to follow even the faintest trail. And so, the background of the case was set: a missing heirloom, a puzzled police investigation, a trained K9, and an observant 3-year-old who had seen what adults could not. The stage was prepared for a courtroom drama, unlike any other, one that would leave observers stunned, media buzzing, and the Matthews family forever grateful. The next steps: Lily's first words, her unique observations, and Rex's instinctive reactions would soon unfold, changing the course of the investigation and creating a story that no one present would ever forget. The courtroom had settled into a tense rhythm, the kind that made the air feel thick and heavy. Lawyers whispered to each other in hushed tones. Officers shifted their weight uneasily, and the judge adjusted his glasses, peering down at the meticulously organized case files. Everything seemed normal, mundane even, until the tiny figure of Lily, no more than 3 years old, took a careful step forward. She walked with a slow, deliberate curiosity, her hand still gently clutching her mother's. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the room, absorbing every detail, the polished wooden benches, the brass handles on the doors, the faint scuff marks on the floor. But one presence drew her attention more than anything else. Rex, the police dog, sitting quietly beside his handler, alert and patient. Lily's mother whispered softly, trying to guide her daughter. "Stay close, Lily. Just watch, okay?" But Lily shook her head, her curls bouncing with determination. "No, Mommy," she said, her voice small but confident. "I need to talk to him." The adults in the room exchanged nervous glances. A 3-year-old speaking directly to a trained K9 in a courtroom was unexpected, to say the least. Some of the attorneys raised their eyebrows, unsure how to proceed. Officers leaned in slightly, curious, trying to anticipate what might happen next. Even the judge, a man of routine and procedure, paused, recognizing that the ordinary rules of courtroom decorum were about to collide with something extraordinary. Lily crouched down slightly, her eyes locking with Rex's. The German shepherd's ears pricked at the movement, his dark eyes steady and focused. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a child playing pretend, but there was something in the way she spoke a quiet authority, an innocence combined with acute perception that commanded attention. "Hello, doggy," she said softly, tilting her head as though waiting for a reply. The room went silent. Paper rustled, whispers halted mid-word, and every pair of eyes seemed glued to the improbable scene unfolding. Rex, ever alert, cocked his head, his tail swishing slightly as though acknowledging her greeting. Detective Harris, who had been observing quietly from the back, exchanged a look with his partner. "Did she just talk to him?" he whispered. The partner shook his head, equally incredulous, unable to articulate what they were seeing. In their experience, children might be cute, and dogs might be trained, but a courtroom interaction of this kind was unprecedented. Still, there was no denying the connection. Something unspoken passed between Lily and Rex, an understanding beyond words. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet powerful. The judge leaned forward in his chair, intrigued despite himself. "Proceed," he said slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Let's see what happens." The courtroom's tension shifted, replaced with curiosity. Everyone, lawyers, officers, journalists, wanted to witness the interaction without disrupting it. Lily's tiny hands rested on her knees as she studied Rex, who remained perfectly still, his gaze following her movements with calculated patience. Then she spoke again, her voice a little stronger this time. "Did you see it? The shiny thing?" Her question was innocent, childlike, yet precise. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the courtroom seemed suspended in time. Officers leaned in closer, lawyers paused mid-note, and the judge's pen hovered above his legal pad. Even the spectators' neighbors, family members, and press felt a thrill of anticipation. A 3-year-old was addressing a trained police dog, and for some reason, the moment felt significant. Rex sniffed the air and moved a few steps toward the far side of the room, his behavior measured, deliberate. Lily's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, that way. Behind the big chair," she exclaimed, pointing toward the corner where the detective had previously noticed something suspicious. A murmur swept through the courtroom, astonishment, disbelief, and amusement all rolled into one. Officers exchanged incredulous glances. Lawyers froze mid-action. Reporters fumbled with their cameras, capturing every frame of the unexpected spectacle. Even the judge couldn't hide a look of wonder. Lily continued, kneeling slightly, speaking in tones that were soft yet commanding. "You saw it. I know you did. Can you show me?" Her words were not rehearsed, yet they carried a clarity and precision that caught everyone off guard. Rex tilted his head, sniffed the corner, and pawed gently at the floor. The connection between them was undeniable, a silent conversation unfolding through gestures, intuition, and trust. It was a remarkable display of nonverbal communication, the kind that left grown adults astonished. Detective Harris felt a shiver run down his spine. He had worked alongside Rex for years, seen the dog track suspects, locate missing evidence, and assist in countless cases. Yet he had never witnessed anything like this. A toddler was not just observing. She was participating, guiding the dog in ways that defied logic yet seemed entirely natural. "She sees what we can't," he whispered to his partner, barely audible over the courtroom's quiet hum. The partner nodded, equally stunned. The media present in the courtroom began whispering among themselves. "This is unbelievable," said one reporter. "I've covered thousands of cases, and I've never seen a child and a police dog communicate like this." Photographers adjusted their lenses, capturing Lily's wide-eyed expression and Rex's attentive stance. The moment was undeniably compelling, filled with a mix of innocence, intuition, and extraordinary perception. It was a scene that promised to leave a lasting impression, not only on the courtroom, but on anyone who would later see the photos or video footage. Lily's mother watched quietly, heart swelling with pride and a touch of apprehension. She had always known her daughter was observant, but she had never imagined this level of awareness or connection. She whispered softly, "You're doing great, sweetie. Just keep talking." Lily nodded, glancing briefly at her mother, then returning her full attention to Rex. The dog responded almost immediately, as if understanding that her words carried significance. The subtle movements of his head, the flick of his ears, the soft wag of his tail all suggested that something extraordinary was occurring. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted further as Lily began pointing to specific areas near the bench, describing objects and details with astonishing accuracy. "There, near the chair with the scratch," she said, directing Rex toward a faint mark on the floor that had gone unnoticed. Officers and detectives leaned in, checking the area she indicated. Their eyes widened as they realized she had pinpointed something relevant, something crucial that could influence the case. It was an uncanny alignment of childlike observation and trained instinct, converging in the most improbable way. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, papers forgotten in their hands. As the realization settled in, this tiny girl had identified a detail that the adult investigators had missed. "This is remarkable," muttered the defense attorney under his breath, unable to hide his surprise. The judge nodded slowly, a mixture of amusement and respect evident in his eyes. "Let's allow the interaction to continue," he said. "It seems beneficial." The courtroom, now fully captivated, watched Lily guide Rex with confidence, wonder, and intuition. Lily's small voice rang out again, repeating instructions she didn't fully understand herself, but instinctively knew were right. "No, the other side. That way," she said, pointing and speaking as if she were leading a seasoned detective, not a 3-year-old. Rex responded immediately, moving with precision to follow her cues. It was as if they were partners, communicating in a language that transcended age, species, and expectation. The reactions of the courtroom were a mix of awe, laughter, and disbelief. Officers whispered, lawyers gasped quietly, and spectators leaned forward in anticipation. Even the judge, a man accustomed to maintaining order and decorum, allowed himself a small smile. The scene was a rare and extraordinary intersection of innocence and skill, curiosity, and trained instinct. Everyone present recognized that they were witnessing something unforgettable, a moment that defied logic, but felt entirely authentic. By the time Lily and Rex had finished their initial interaction, a sense of wonder had settled over the courtroom. The tension that had marked the morning was replaced by quiet admiration. The stolen locket, once lost in mystery, suddenly felt closer to discovery, not because of evidence alone, but because of the perceptive eyes of a 3-year-old and the disciplined instincts of a police dog. The case, which had seemed stalled, now glimmered with hope. And so, Lily's first words, simple, innocent, and unassuming, had shifted the entire dynamic of the courtroom. They had captured attention, commanded respect, and most importantly, bridged the gap between human intuition and animal instinct. For those present, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and that insight can come from the most unexpected sources. In that quiet, sunlit courtroom, a 3-year-old had begun a conversation that would leave everyone stunned and change the course of a case that had once seemed unsolvable. The courtroom, once dominated by papers, whispers, and the orderly shuffle of legal procedures, had transformed into a stage for something entirely different. Every eye remained fixed on the unlikely duo at the center, Lily, a 3-year-old girl with curls bouncing as she moved, and Rex, a disciplined police dog, whose trained instincts now seemed to dance in harmony with the child's curiosity. A hushed silence had descended upon the room, the kind of quiet that signals anticipation, awe, and the recognition that what was unfolding was far from ordinary. Lily knelt in front of Rex, her tiny fingers brushing the polished floorboards as she studied the dog with rapt attention. "Did you see it?" she asked, her voice tentative yet insistent. "The shiny thing?" Her words were simple, but the way she framed them directed at the dog carried an authority and precision that drew the attention of everyone present. Officers leaned forward, jaws tight, while the judge's pen hovered above his legal pad, frozen mid-note. The phrase might have sounded nonsensical to the untrained ear, yet those who understood the K9 unit knew that every word, paired with gestures and cues, could guide Rex to a discovery long hidden from human eyes. Rex, his ears pricked, sniffed the air, shifting slightly toward a corner near the witness stand. His gaze remained locked on Lily, as if understanding that her small voice was more than play, it was direction. The detective in charge, Detective Harris, barely breathed as he observed the interaction. Years of working with Rex had taught him that the dog was remarkable, capable of detecting scents, hidden evidence, and subtle behavioral cues. But a 3-year-old guiding him with words, gestures, and instinct? That was unprecedented. She's actually guiding him," Harris whispered to his partner, disbelief coloring his tone. The courtroom watched in astonishment as Lily continued. "Over there, behind the big chair. That's where it went," she exclaimed, pointing with conviction. Every movement seemed precise, purposeful, yet entirely natural, as though she had a map in her mind, invisible to everyone else. Rex responded immediately, moving in silent obedience toward the area she indicated, his paws making soft thuds on the polished floor. Journalists fumbled to adjust their cameras, capturing the moment that would soon become viral. The small child, who seemed to communicate with a police dog in a way that defied reason. Lily's words became more specific, almost startling in their accuracy. "The shiny thing? It's small, round, and it has a little twist," she said, crouching lower to emphasize her point. Officers exchanged incredulous glances. Some reached for their notebooks, trying to transcribe every word. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, unsure whether to intervene or simply witness this moment unfold. The judge, leaning forward on his bench, allowed the scene to continue, realizing that any interruption might break the fragile connection forming between child and dog. Rex's movements mirrored Lily's guidance. He sniffed around the base of the chair she had indicated, his nose brushing against a faint metallic glint, partially obscured by the polished floor. The room erupted in suppressed gasps. The missing locket, the tiny silver heirloom that had confounded detectives for weeks, lay partially hidden beneath the corner of the chair, exactly where Lily had gestured. The adult investigators, despite their experience and training, had overlooked it. A 3-year-old had discovered what they could not, aided only by a combination of intuition and the dog's trained instincts. The courtroom seemed to collectively exhale. Some officers shook their heads in disbelief. One whispered, almost reverently, "I've never... how did she know?" The judge's voice, calm but tinged with awe, broke the silence. This is remarkable," he said. "Let's proceed carefully, but I believe this discovery is valid." Lawyers nodded, scribbling notes, while reporters whispered among themselves, sensing a story that would captivate readers far beyond the small-town courthouse. Lily's attention never wavered. She knelt beside Rex, patting his head gently, as if acknowledging his role in the discovery. "Good job, doggy," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You helped me find it." The officer smiled, and some chuckled quietly, but there was a palpable sense of awe in the air. A simple, innocent statement had confirmed the bond forming between child and dog, demonstrating that insight and intuition often transcend age, training, or expectation. Detective Harris knelt near Lily, careful not to intrude. "Do you remember where you saw it first?" he asked softly. Lily's small face scrunched in concentration, as though replaying a memory in her mind. "It was shiny. By the chair. And I knew the dog could help me," she said, matter-of-factly. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the certainty of a child whose perception was keen enough to guide a trained police dog to the precise location of the missing object. The media present in the courtroom quickly recognized the significance of the moment. Cameras flashed, recording the discovery, while journalists scribbled notes furiously. "Unbelievable," whispered one. "A toddler and a canine solving a case together." Social media would soon amplify the story. But for now, the courtroom itself remained the epicenter of the awe-inspiring event. Observers whispered about the extraordinary intelligence and awareness of children, and the unparalleled capabilities of trained animals. Together, they had created a moment that would be remembered long after the case concluded. Lily continued to examine the area, gesturing toward a faint mark on the chair's leg. "The person who took it. They didn't want anyone to see," she said softly, almost narrating the scene. Rex sniffed the spot carefully, his tail swishing slightly. The detective noted the detail, realizing that Lily had inadvertently provided insight, not only into the location of the locket, but also into the nature of the theft. The thief had been careful, deliberate, and precise, leaving little evidence behind. Yet the combination of Lily's observation and Rex's training had uncovered what human investigation alone could not. The judge, observing quietly, allowed the courtroom to remain still. "Sometimes," he murmured, almost to himself, "the smallest voices carry the greatest truths." His words, unplanned and reflective, resonated throughout the room. Lawyers and officers exchanged looks of respect and surprise. Even those who were initially skeptical of Lily's presence now understood that her observations were crucial. What had begun as an ordinary courtroom session had evolved into an extraordinary display of intuition, observation, and collaboration. Lily's words and guidance continued for several more minutes. She instructed Rex to sniff the perimeter, point toward subtle clues, and even indicate areas where the thief might have handled objects. Each instruction was followed with precision, and each action revealed small details that had been overlooked for weeks. For the Matthews family, watching from the gallery, it was both astonishing and heartwarming. Their tiny relative, often underestimated because of her age, was actively contributing to the resolution of a case that had brought them anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. Finally, Lily turned to Rex, patting him gently. "We found it," she exclaimed, a broad smile lighting up her face. The dog responded with a subtle wag of his tail, as if acknowledging the accomplishment. The courtroom, too, erupted in quiet applause, smiles, and soft laughter. The tension that had marked the morning dissipated, replaced by a sense of wonder and admiration. Adults, trained professionals, and even journalists were humbled by the display of perception, intuition, and unexpected collaboration between human and animal. Detective Harris, finally able to speak, leaned down to Lily. "You did something remarkable today," he said gently. Lily looked up, her wide eyes filled with pride. "I just wanted to help," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Yet the simplicity of her words belied their impact. She had not only guided a police dog to a critical discovery, but it also reminded everyone present that insight. Courage and intelligence are not confined to age or experience. By the time the courtroom proceedings resumed, the stolen locket had been recovered, carefully handled, and logged as evidence. Lily had already returned to her mother's side, quietly observing as adults resumed their procedural routines. But the energy in the room had changed. Officers and lawyers spoke in hushed tones about the extraordinary collaboration they had witnessed. Reporters captured every detail, aware that the story would soon reach far beyond the small-town courthouse. For the Matthews family and for everyone present, the moment was unforgettable. In that sunlit courtroom, a 3-year-old had spoken, guided a trained police dog, and uncovered the truth hidden in plain sight. It was a testament to innocence, intuition, and the unexpected ways in which insight can emerge. The story would later be shared nationwide, inspiring awe and admiration for the extraordinary bond between a child and a loyal, intelligent animal. And though the case itself might fade from memory, the astonishing conversation between Lily and Rex would live on, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most profound truths. The courtroom, once filled with a tense formality, now seemed almost transformed, alive with astonishment, awe, and a sense of warmth that no one had anticipated that morning. The stolen locket, recovered in a sequence of events that seemed almost miraculous, had shifted the room's energy. Lily, a 3-year-old with an uncanny ability to observe and guide, had just orchestrated a revelation that adults, with all their experience and training, had overlooked for weeks. Every pair of eyes seemed glued to the small figure kneeling beside Rex, her curls bouncing slightly as she patted the dog, her face alight with the satisfaction of a job well done. Detective Harris, who had worked with Rex for more than a decade, shook his head in disbelief. "I've seen it all," he muttered under his breath. And yet nothing like this. His partner, equally stunned, simply nodded, unsure how to articulate the mixture of wonder and professional amazement he felt. Officers who had spent years handling evidence, interviewing witnesses, and tracking suspects were now confronted with a truth that defied conventional methods. A toddler, with intuition and innocence, had guided a trained police dog to a critical piece of evidence. The judge, who had initially been skeptical, now allowed a small, incredulous smile to appear on his face. "Well," he said, leaning forward on his bench, "I must admit, this is unusual, remarkably unusual." His voice, calm but filled with astonishment, carried through the courtroom, causing lawyers and spectators alike to sit straighter, aware that this was a moment they would not soon forget. He paused, tapping the gavel lightly, almost ceremoniously, as though acknowledging that what had just occurred required its own measure of recognition. Lawyers, both defense and prosecution, exchanged astonished glances. Papers that had seemed so vital only moments ago were now nearly irrelevant compared to the astonishing display of intuition they had just witnessed. One attorney whispered to his colleague, "Did she really just guide the dog?" The colleague's jaw dropped slightly. "Yes," he murmured, "and she did it with more precision than some of the witnesses we've had over the years." The courtroom, typically a stage for strategy, argument, and evidence, had become something else entirely. A theater of wonder, a space where innocence, observation, and trained skill converged in a way that defied explanation. Spectators, many of whom were friends, family, or members of the local community, found themselves smiling, shaking their heads in disbelief, and even chuckling softly. Some whispered to one another about how extraordinary it was that a 3-year-old could have such clarity and focus, guiding Rex with gestures, words, and a natural understanding that seemed almost preternatural. Others simply watched, speechless, as the child and the dog continued their subtle interaction, a quiet dance of attention, intuition, and mutual respect. Even the court reporters, who had seen countless unusual events in their careers, paused to record what was unfolding. They scribbled furiously, capturing every word Lily had spoken, every gesture, every indication that she had given Rex. The footage, some of which would later circulate on social media, began to tell a story far beyond the courtroom's walls. A story of innocence and intelligence, of a bond between human and animal that transcended training, age, and expectation. The Matthews family, seated quietly in the gallery, were overwhelmed with a mix of pride, relief, and awe. The locket, an item of immense sentimental value, tied to generations of family history, was now recovered, thanks to a child whose perspective had been overlooked for so long. Mrs. Matthews, holding back tears, whispered to her husband, "I can't believe it. She actually found it." Mr. Matthews, equally stunned, nodded, his eyes glistening. "It's incredible. She knew things we couldn't even see." Their gratitude toward Lily, and toward Rex for responding to her guidance, was palpable, creating a quiet emotional resonance that spread throughout the courtroom. Rex, for his part, seemed almost proud. The German shepherd sat obediently beside Lily, his head slightly lowered as if acknowledging the child's contribution. His tail wagged subtly, a silent affirmation that the collaboration had succeeded. Officers and detectives, who had trained the dog extensively, recognized that this moment demonstrated something beyond training. It was a testament to trust, perception, and a connection that could not be forced or taught. As the initial excitement began to settle, murmurs of admiration spread through the room. "I've never seen anything like it," one officer remarked quietly. "The child's awareness, the way she guided him, it's remarkable." Another nodded in agreement. "It's like she can see things through his eyes, or he can see through hers. Either way, it's unbelievable." The courtroom, usually a space dominated by logic, procedure, and evidence, had been infused with an almost magical sense of possibility. Adults were reminded that intuition, observation, and innocence could illuminate truths that formal methods sometimes missed. Journalists present began to prepare their notes and recordings for publication. The story was irresistible. A toddler guiding a police dog in a courtroom, discovering critical evidence that had eluded trained professionals. One reporter whispered to another, "This is going to go viral. People will talk about it for weeks." Cameras clicked and flashed, capturing the improbable collaboration between child and canine, immortalizing a moment that combined awe, warmth, and inspiration. Social media, when it eventually caught wind of the story, would erupt with admiration, disbelief, and countless shares, extending the reach of the event far beyond the courthouse walls. Yet for all the external attention, there was also an internal, human dimension to the reactions. The adults in the room, seasoned professionals accustomed to measuring intelligence, skill, and competence in traditional ways, were forced to reconsider their assumptions. They had been trained to value procedure, evidence, and logic, yet here was a tiny child, without formal training or understanding of the law, contributing in a manner that was both profound and practical. It was a lesson in humility, a reminder that insight could emerge from the most unexpected sources. The judge called for a brief recess, recognizing that the emotional energy in the room was high, and that allowing a moment of pause would help maintain decorum. As the spectators shifted in their seats and officers moved quietly, there was a sense that the event had left an indelible mark on everyone present. Whispers of admiration, incredulity, and joy filled the air. The Matthews family gathered their belongings, holding Lily's hand as she beamed with satisfaction, still unaware of the broader significance of what she had achieved. Detective Harris, taking a step back, reflected quietly. "It's rare," he muttered, "to see something like this. We spend years tracking evidence, training animals, analyzing every detail, and yet a 3-year-old finds what we missed." His partner nodded in solemn agreement, recognizing that the collaboration between Lily and Rex had revealed a layer of perception and insight that extended beyond standard investigative techniques. It was a humbling, inspiring reminder of the power of observation, intuition, and the unexpected intelligence of youth. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the emotional energy had transformed into a quiet focus. The locket had been recovered, recorded, and logged as evidence. The case, once seemingly stalled, now had momentum, guided by the perceptive eyes of a 3-year-old and the disciplined instincts of a police dog. The courtroom's atmosphere, though still formal and serious, had been infused with a sense of wonder and possibility. Adults spoke in hushed tones about the extraordinary occurrence, while spectators marveled at the improbable collaboration they had just witnessed. Lily, her task seemingly complete, returned to her mother's side. Clutching her hand and glancing occasionally at Rex, the dog remained obediently at the front, his demeanor calm yet alert, as though recognizing that his job, in partnership with the child, had been accomplished successfully. The bond that had formed in that brief, remarkable moment between innocence and experience, intuition and training, would resonate long after the case concluded. In the days that followed, the courtroom staff and investigators would recount the event repeatedly, each telling infused with a mixture of pride, amazement, and disbelief. The story of a 3-year-old guiding a police dog to recover a missing heirloom became emblematic of the extraordinary ways insight can manifest, and how even the youngest participants can contribute in meaningful, transformative ways. For those present, the lesson was clear. Attentiveness, courage, and trust in the unexpected can illuminate truths that conventional methods might overlook. And so, the courtroom, once a place of tension, procedure, and formality, had become a space of awe, connection, and profound admiration. A child, a dog, and a family heirloom had converged to create a story that would be remembered for years to come, a story of innocence, intelligence, and the subtle yet astonishing ways in which insight can emerge, leaving everyone who witnessed it stunned and inspired. By the time the court recessed, the story of Lily and Rex had already begun to spread beyond the walls of the courthouse. Reporters, initially skeptical of the unfolding scene, were now scrambling to document every detail. The small courtroom in the quiet suburban town had suddenly become a stage for a story that was impossible to ignore. A 3-year-old girl, guided by instinct and observation, communicating with a trained police dog to recover a missing family heirloom. Cameras clicked incessantly, journalists whispered frantically to one another, and notebooks were filled with hastily scribbled descriptions of what had happened. Within hours, local news outlets had picked up the story. Headlines screamed with a mix of disbelief and admiration. 3-year-old solves case with police dog, and toddler guides canine to missing heirloom in courtroom miracle. Video clips from the courtroom, some of which captured Lily kneeling in front of Rex, gesturing and speaking in her small, confident voice, were shared on social media. Within minutes, the story began to attract attention from people far beyond the town where the case had taken place. What had been a local incident now had the potential to reach national, even international audiences. Viewers were captivated by the unlikely collaboration. Comments flooded in from every platform imaginable. "This is incredible," wrote one Twitter user, accompanied by a screenshot of the video. "She's a genius," posted another, followed by hundreds of likes and retweets. People marveled at Lily's intelligence, her instinctive ability to guide a trained police dog, and the extraordinary connection she shared with Rex. The story was shared thousands of times in a matter of hours, resonating with audiences who were hungry for something both heartwarming and astonishing. Local journalists rushed to follow up with interviews. They spoke with Detective Harris, who described the event with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "We've worked with Rex for years," he explained, "but nothing could have prepared us for the clarity and precision that Lily brought. She noticed details adults had overlooked and guided the dog in a way that was remarkable. It's rare to witness something like this, a child and an animal collaborating in a professional environment with such effectiveness." His words were heartfelt, underscoring the significance of the event beyond the viral spectacle. A Matthews family was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Interviews captured the awe on Mrs. Matthews' face as she described her daughter's keen observations. "Lily has always been very perceptive," she said, voice trembling slightly. "But I never imagined she would notice things that even trained professionals missed. She has a gift for seeing the world in a way adults often overlook." Mr. Matthews added, "We are incredibly proud. But more than that, we are amazed. Seeing our little girl and Rex work together, it's something we'll never forget." Their story added a human dimension to the media coverage, providing warmth, emotional resonance, and relatability to the viral phenomenon. Social media users were especially drawn to the video footage of Lily speaking to Rex, short clips of her pointing toward the chair, gesturing to the spot where the missing locket lay, and speaking in her calm, deliberate voice were shared across platforms like wildfire. Comments poured in, often expressing disbelief mixed with admiration. "How does a toddler do this? The dog knew she could help. This is the most heartwarming thing I've seen all year." Within days, the hashtag toddler and canine began trending, capturing the imagination of audiences across the globe. Psychologists and child development experts weighed in, offering explanations for what seemed miraculous. Some suggested that Lily's extraordinary attention to detail, combined with her natural empathy and comfort around animals, allowed her to notice patterns and cues that adults overlooked. Others emphasized the remarkable bond between humans and animals, highlighting how Rex's training and responsiveness created an environment in which a child's intuition could translate into practical guidance. Media coverage was punctuated with expert commentary, making the story not just viral entertainment, but also a case study in observation, perception, and interspecies collaboration. News outlets sent reporters to the courthouse for follow-up interviews with Rex's handler. Officer Daniels, who had been responsible for the dog, explained the unique training process that had made the moment possible. "Rex is trained to follow commands, detect scents, and locate evidence," Daniels said. "But he is also sensitive to subtle cues from humans, even children." Lily's words, gestures, and calm confidence gave him a framework he could respond to. Together, they became a team in the truest sense of the word. It was incredible to witness. His account highlighted how preparation, training, and the natural instincts of both child and dog converged in a perfect storm of collaboration. Soon, news of the story reached national outlets. Morning shows featured clips of Lily speaking to Rex, complete with slow-motion highlights showing her tiny fingers pointing toward the corner where the locket had been hidden. Newspapers published full-page spreads chronicling the sequence of events, the courtroom reactions, and interviews with those involved. Public radio programs invited Detective Harris, Mrs. Matthews, and Officer Daniels to recount the story live, allowing audiences across the country to marvel at the extraordinary collaboration. Each telling emphasized the innocence, intelligence, and insight that Lily had brought to the case. Meanwhile, online communities erupted in discussion. Parenting forums celebrated Lily's curiosity, intelligence, and calm courage. Animal lovers marveled at Rex's responsiveness and his apparent understanding of the child's intentions. Social media influencers shared clips, praising the story as one of the most heartwarming and astonishing viral moments of the year. Within days, memes and illustrations depicting Lily and Rex as a superhero duo began to circulate, blending humor, creativity, and admiration into the cultural conversation. The story, once confined to a small-town courthouse, had captured the imagination of millions. But amid the viral attention, there was also a profound human response. Messages poured into the Matthews family from people touched by the story. Grandparents, parents, and children wrote letters expressing admiration and inspiration. "Your daughter reminded us that even the youngest among us can change the world," one note read. "She and Rex are a symbol of hope, intelligence, and courage." These messages reinforced that the story resonated not only because of its unusual circumstances, but because it touched something universal: the power of innocence, insight, and empathy to illuminate truths that adults often overlook. As the media frenzy continued, the local police department issued a formal statement. They praised Lily's observational skills, Rex's training, and the teamwork that had led to the recovery of the heirloom. The statement emphasized that the case was now resolved, thanks to the extraordinary collaboration of child and dog, while also acknowledging the importance of supporting young witnesses and valuing the contributions of those who might be underestimated due to age or inexperience. It was a recognition that the story, viral as it had become, carried lessons about perception, collaboration, and the potential within every human, regardless of age. By the end of the week, national television programs, podcasts, and online news sites had carried the story. Lily and Rex were featured as a duo whose unusual teamwork had captured hearts and minds. The Matthews family, while overwhelmed by the attention, remained grounded, grateful that their daughter's story had inspired so many people. Officer Daniels and Detective Harris became minor celebrities in their own right, often invited to recount the story and discuss the lessons it held for law enforcement, child development, and the public. Amid all the attention, Lily remained blissfully unaware of her sudden fame. To her, the event had been simple. She had helped the dog find something that belonged to her family. She did not grasp the magnitude of what had unfolded, or the millions of people who would soon watch, read, and share her story. Yet in that simplicity lay its power. Audiences everywhere were captivated because the story was genuine, heartfelt, an extraordinary reminder that even the smallest among us can have a profound impact when curiosity, courage, and collaboration come together. In classrooms, offices, and homes across the country, people replayed the clips, discussed the sequence of events, and marveled at the unusual partnership between a toddler and a police dog. Teachers used the story as an example of observation and intuition. Psychologists discussed it in terms of child development, and animal trainers marveled at the precision of Rex's responsiveness. The viral phenomenon became more than entertainment. It became a cultural touchstone, a story that illustrated the extraordinary potential in the ordinary. And as the days turned into weeks, the story showed no signs of fading. Articles, interviews, and social media posts continued to highlight the collaboration, the courtroom's reactions, and the heartwarming display of courage, intelligence, and empathy. Lily and Rex, in their quiet, unassuming way, had touched the lives of countless people, leaving a lasting impression that extended far beyond the courthouse, the stolen heirloom, or even the town itself. Their story had gone viral, but its impact was deeper than mere online attention. It had reminded people everywhere of the power of observation, trust, and the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when who? The days following the Corkroom miracle were a whirlwind for the Matthews family. The recovery of the locket had brought not only relief, but also a profound sense of amazement. The media attention continued to pour in, yet behind the flashbulbs and headlines, there were quieter, deeply personal moments that resonated more powerfully than any public recognition. For Mrs. Matthews, the realization that her young daughter's observation had solved what seemed an impossible case brought tears of gratitude. She had always known Lily was perceptive, but this event revealed a depth of awareness that far exceeded what anyone had imagined possible in a 3-year-old Mr. Matthews. Equally stunned, reflected on the significance of the moment. "It wasn't just that she helped find the locket," he said softly, holding his daughter's hand as she played quietly nearby. "It was the courage, the confidence, and the clarity with which she acted. She didn't hesitate. She didn't falter. She just knew, and she trusted her instincts." Their words, spoken in the quiet privacy of their home after the media had left, carried a weight that underscored the profound lessons embedded in Lily's actions. That observation, trust, and intuition can surpass expectation, and that even the smallest among us can make an extraordinary impact. For Lily herself, the aftermath was less about recognition and more about normalcy. Children often process experiences differently than adults, and Lily's understanding of what had transpired was intuitive rather than analytical. To her, the sequence of events was simple. A missing object was found with the help of a friendly dog. She played with Rex, patted his head, and spoke to him as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet those who watched her closely, her parents, Detective Harris, and the Corkroom staff, recognized the quiet brilliance in her actions. She had demonstrated clarity, empathy, and an understanding of collaboration that many adults struggle to achieve in a lifetime. The Corkroom staff also found themselves reflecting on the event with awe and humility. Judges, clerks, and legal assistants who had witnessed the interaction repeatedly commented on the rarity of the occurrence. "We see unexpected things every day in court," one clerk remarked, "but never anything like this." A toddler, guiding a police dog, uncovering a piece of evidence that adults had overlooked. It was surreal. Judges spoke privately with each other, noting how extraordinary it was to see the formal structures of law momentarily give way to intuition and collaboration that transcended age, experience, and expectation. The courtroom itself had become a space not just for procedure, but for wonder. Detective Harris and Officer Daniels, who had worked with Rex for years, found themselves reflecting on the lessons of the case. Harris remarked, "We train Rex to follow commands, detect scents, and assist in investigations." But he responded to a child's intuition in a way that revealed something new about both him and us. It's a reminder that our perspective can always expand, and that we must remain open to insights from unexpected sources. Daniels nodded in agreement. It changes how we think about witnesses, how we think about collaboration, and it shows the incredible potential in combining human observation, childlike curiosity, and trained instinct. As the public continued to engage with the story online, messages of admiration poured in from all over the world. Parents wrote about how inspired they felt. Teachers discussed the educational value of observation and attention to detail, and animal enthusiasts marveled at Rex's responsiveness. While the Matthews family had initially felt overwhelmed by the attention, they gradually came to understand that Lily's story had sparked something larger. A conversation about intelligence, empathy, collaboration, and the underestimated capabilities of children. The case also sparked interest in law enforcement and canine training circles. Officers began to discuss the importance of considering unconventional input, whether from children, civilians, or other unexpected sources. Rex's responsiveness to Lily highlighted that trained animals could interpret subtle cues and that even minor observations could lead to major breakthroughs. Trainings began to incorporate exercises focused on recognizing indirect communication, intuitive guidance, and collaboration beyond formal commands. In many ways, Lily's brief but transformative participation became a case study in adaptability and open-minded investigation. For the Matthews family, the personal impact was profound. The locket itself, once a missing piece of family history, had returned to its rightful place. But the emotional significance ran deeper than mere recovery. It was a testament to the power of attention, the value of trust, and the unexpected brilliance within their young daughter. Family dinners were now often punctuated with gentle storytelling, recounting the day Lily and Rex uncovered the locket. Friends and relatives who had once been skeptical of a child's potential were now in awe, recognizing that intelligence and courage often manifest in unpredictable ways. Even Lily's teachers took notice. While the child had always been observant and curious, the event gave them a renewed perspective on her capabilities. They began incorporating exercises that emphasized observation, critical thinking, and empathy toward others, inspired by the way Lily had naturally processed her environment. Her story became a gentle reminder that education is not just about instruction, but about nurturing curiosity, trust in one's own perception, and the confidence to act on insight, even when conventional expectations suggest otherwise. The Matthews family also noticed subtle changes in their community. Neighbors who had followed the story were more attentive to their children, more willing to listen to insights from younger voices, and more appreciative of the potential in everyday observation. Conversations in local cafes and parks often revolved around Lily's remarkable courtroom contribution. "It makes you think," one neighbor commented, "about how much children notice and how much we miss because we're too focused on what we think matters." The story, initially confined to a courtroom and a family, had inspired broader reflection on the overlooked wisdom of the young. As weeks passed, the emotional impact of the case settled into a quieter, enduring sense of pride and inspiration. The Matthews family treasured the memory of Lily, kneeling beside Rex, her small voice guiding him with clarity and assurance. Detective Harris continued to speak about the event at seminars and professional gatherings, emphasizing the lesson of humility and openness to unconventional guidance. Officer Daniels integrated the experience into K-9 training programs, highlighting the importance of responsiveness to subtle cues and collaborative problem-solving. Even the judge occasionally recounted the event to colleagues, marveling at the extraordinary occurrence. For Lily, life slowly returned to normal. The media attention faded gradually, the courtroom lights dimmed, and the bustling reporters moved on to new stories. Yet the experience had left a subtle but lasting imprint on her young mind. Though she might not fully grasp the significance of the attention she had received, the act of observing, guiding, and achieving something remarkable likely reinforced her confidence, curiosity, and sense of agency. In the quiet moments, her parents noticed a newfound determination in her gaze, a sense that she understood she could make a difference, even in situations that seemed beyond her years. The story of Lily and Rex, however, remained alive in public memory. Clips circulated online, shared and reshared, inspiring countless viewers to consider the extraordinary possibilities hidden in ordinary moments. In classrooms, offices, and households around the country, people discussed the story not merely for its novelty, but for its lessons, the importance of attention to detail, the value of collaboration, and the potential in voices often overlooked. Lily's courage and intuition, combined with Rex's trained responsiveness, had sparked a phenomenon that blended wonder, inspiration, and practical wisdom. In quiet reflection, Detective Harris summarized what many had begun to realize. We sometimes measure intelligence and capability by age, experience, or formal training. But this case reminded us that insight comes from observation, empathy, and the willingness to act. A 3-year-old and a police dog solved what adults could not. And that is a lesson we cannot forget. His words captured the essence of the event. A combination of innocence, intuition, and skill had reshaped a case, inspired a community, and touched hearts far beyond the courtroom walls. The Matthews family would often recount the day in private moments, sitting together, holding Lily's hand, and reflecting on the whirlwind of events. They found themselves both humbled and inspired. The locket, restored to its place, symbolized not just the return of a treasured family heirloom, but the power of curiosity, observation, and courage to create change. The courtroom, the police department, and even the wider public had witnessed an extraordinary collaboration, one that underscored the profound potential in each individual, regardless of age. And so, the aftermath was more than headlines and viral videos. It was a story of reflection, humility, and inspiration. It was a tale of human and animal intelligence working in tandem, of the extraordinary emerging from the ordinary, and of a family learning to see the world through the perceptive eyes of a remarkable little girl. The event would be remembered not merely for its novelty, but for the lessons it carried about trust, observation, collaboration, and the coup. In the weeks and months following the courtroom discovery, life began to return to a quieter rhythm for the Matthews family, though nothing would ever feel entirely the same. The stolen locket had been recovered, its sentimental value restored, but the true legacy of the event was far greater than a piece of jewelry. Lily, a 3-year-old whose curiosity, observation, and instinct had astonished adults, continued to inspire everyone around her. The story of her collaboration with Rex, the police dog, had transformed from a courtroom miracle into a lasting testament to the extraordinary potential hidden within the ordinary. At home, Lily's parents marveled at her calm, confident demeanor. Though the media attention had died down, they could still see the subtle ways in which the experience had shaped her. She approached problems with a newfound determination, observed her surroundings with even greater focus, and engaged with Rex as if they shared a secret understanding. The bond between child and dog had grown beyond their brief courtroom collaboration. Rex, ever patient and loyal, seemed to recognize that Lily's guidance was not just incidental, it was integral to the way he engaged with the world. Their connection was now more profound, an unspoken understanding that transcended words and gestures. The Matthews family's quiet evenings often included gentle play and observation exercises, inspired by what had occurred in the courtroom. They encouraged Lily to describe her surroundings, point out details others might miss, and express her thoughts freely. These moments were not about achievement or accolades, but about nurturing curiosity and reinforcing confidence in her perception. Even at 3 years old, Lily demonstrated an intuitive understanding of cause and effect, spatial awareness, and empathy skills often underestimated at her age. The family recognized that the courtroom incident had unveiled something remarkable in her, a natural acuity that deserved encouragement rather than containment. Meanwhile, Rex continued his official duties with the police department, but his interactions with Lily had left a lasting mark on the officers as well. Detective Harris often reflected on the event during routine debriefings or casual conversations with colleagues. "We train dogs for precision, reliability, and responsiveness," he explained. But the lesson Lily and Rex taught us is that insight can come from anywhere. You just have to be open to it. Officer Daniels, too, incorporated the experience into K-9 training sessions, emphasizing observation, intuition, and responsiveness to subtle cues. Their shared experience had reshaped not only their perceptions of child witnesses, but also their understanding of collaboration, trust, and communication. In the local community, the story continued to resonate. Parents, teachers, and neighbors would often recount the events of that extraordinary day in casual conversation, each retelling imbued with amazement. It became a symbol of hope, inspiration, and the unseen potential in young children. The courthouse itself, once an austere space of procedure and decorum, was now remembered as the stage for a story that had united the town in awe and admiration. Tourists occasionally visited the building, hoping to glimpse the corner where the locket had been found and to imagine the tiny girl and her heroic dog in action. Nationally, the story of Lily and Rex continued to circulate through news segments, social media shares, and human interest programs. Journalists revisited the event, often interviewing the Matthews family or the officers involved. The tale was celebrated not only for its novelty, but for the lessons it imparted, the value of observation, the power of collaboration across species, and the remarkable potential within children, often underestimated. The narrative resonated deeply because it combined wonder, intelligence, and heart, leaving audiences inspired to pay closer attention to the extraordinary possibilities present in everyday life. Within educational circles, the story became a case study in observation, problem-solving, and child development. Teachers used it to demonstrate the importance of fostering curiosity and encouraging children to trust their instincts. Psychologists highlighted Lily's ability to integrate visual cues, auditory signals, and intuition, explaining that her actions were a natural extension of keen observational skills, spatial awareness, and empathy. Workshops and seminars often included clips of Lily guiding Rex, illustrating the profound connection between humans and animals, and the potential for unconventional collaboration to yield extraordinary results. Back at home, Lily's parents continued to nurture her gifts with gentle guidance. They encouraged her to explore, to question, and to observe, providing a safe space for curiosity to flourish. Though Lily remained unaware of the full scope of her fame, her parents celebrated the qualities that had made the courtroom moment possible: her focus, her empathy, and her fearless curiosity. Every day became an opportunity to reinforce those qualities, whether through quiet observation walks, playful detective games, or simply encouraging her to notice small details in the world around her. For Rex, the experience had deepened his bond with both Lily and the Matthews family. While his professional duties continued, he seemed to carry a subtle awareness of the child's insight, responding to her gestures and voice with patience and precision. The officers noted that Rex's responsiveness had grown even more attuned after the incident, as though he recognized the importance of perception, collaboration, and trust in guiding actions. In this way, the courtroom episode had permanently enriched the dynamic between human and animal, highlighting a rare and inspiring example of partnership across species. The Matthews family also began to engage with the public in more intentional ways. They participated in community events, sharing their story with local children and families, emphasizing the importance of curiosity, attention, and empathy. Lily's quiet presence at these events often drew admiration, as audiences marveled at her ability to recall details, guide activities, and interact with animals with such confidence. Her story became more than a viral sensation. It became a touchstone for teaching values, inspiring curiosity, and demonstrating the remarkable potential of children when given the freedom to explore, observe, and act. In time, the courtroom incident was formally recognized as an extraordinary example of collaboration, observation, and insight. Local organizations honored the Matthews family and Rex, celebrating the unusual but profoundly meaningful contributions of a child and her dog. Awards, certificates, and community recognition were bestowed not merely for discovery of the locket, but for the broader impact, the inspiration, the reminder of human potential, and the affirmation that sometimes extraordinary solutions emerge from unexpected sources. For the Matthews family, the true legacy of the event lay in the quiet, everyday lessons it imparted. The locket had been recovered, the media attention eventually subsided, and life returned to a calmer rhythm. Yet the memory of Lily guiding Rex, her small voice steady, confident, and filled with intuition, remained indelibly imprinted on their hearts. They knew that this moment, though fleeting in time, had revealed something eternal, the extraordinary potential within the ordinary, the profound capability within a child, and the remarkable results that can emerge when trust, observation, and collaboration converge. As the sun set over the town in the weeks following the courtroom incident, the Matthews family often reflected on the journey. They walked hand in hand, sometimes with Rex at their side, observing the world with a renewed sense of wonder. Lily's actions had reminded them, and countless others, of the importance of noticing the details, valuing intuition, and embracing collaboration, no matter how unconventional it might appear. It was a legacy of inspiration, one that would ripple through their community and beyond, a story of heart, intelligence, and courage that transcended age, species, and expectation. Ultimately, the story of Lily and Rex became more than a remarkable courtroom tale. It became a timeless narrative of hope, insight, and the extraordinary possibilities hidden within everyday life. A 3-year-old had spoken, observed, and guided with clarity. A trained police dog had responded with precision, trust, and understanding. And together, they had not only solved a case, but inspired a world. The locket, restored to its rightful place, was a symbol, but the true treasure lay in the lessons learned, the connections forged, and the enduring reminder that extraordinary moments can come from the most unexpected sources. In the quiet of the Matthews family home, Lily played with Rex, their laughter and gentle barks filling the air. Outside, the world continued, unaware of the extraordinary events that had unfolded in that small courtroom. Yet for those who had witnessed it, for the family whose lives had been touched, and for the officers and courtroom staff forever changed by the moment, the story would live on. It was a story of courage, insight, and collaboration, a story that reminded everyone, young and old, that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and the unlikeliest partnerships can produce the most remarkable outcomes. And in the end, that is exactly what happened. A 3-year-old, a police dog, and the quiet power of observation left the world inspired, amazed, and profoundly moved, forever changing the way people thought about intelligence, collaboration, and the extraordinary potential hidden in the most ordinary moments.